Captain Anchor Reese hated mornings, mostly because mornings hated her back with an unparalleled passion. It didn't help that the sentient planet of Bifurca chose the worst possible moments to wake up its inhabitants. She was beginning to suspect the damned planet had a sense of humor as twisted as hers. "Captain, we've got a problem," came the all-too-chipper voice of Lieutenant Grayson over the comms. "Of course we do," Anka muttered to herself, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Spill it, Grayson, how bad is it?" The rusted ceiling of the cramped quarters did little to inspire confidence in the mission. It creaked ominously like it was considering dropping the whole mess right onto her bed as a wake-up call. "Well," Grayson continued, "we've got an alien race on sensors, the Zeecle. They're not exactly known for their hospitality," Anka snorted. "Oh good, I was worried today might be boring. Tell me more about our new pen pals. They've sent us a message, something about impending conflict, or maybe they just want to borrow a cup of sugar." "Hard to tell with aliens," Grayson said, pausing before adding, "and they're kind of surrounding us." "Perfect. Just the kind of welcome wagon I was hoping for," Anka replied, dragging herself out of bed and into the less-than-flattering jumpsuit she called a uniform. "Guess it's time to make some new friends." The expedition team was already assembled in the command center by the time Anka arrived. A motley crew of humans, each with their own quirks and questionable fashion choices. Dr. Amelia Park, the resident xenobiologist, feigned deep concentration over her notes, though Anka suspected she was just doodling alien anatomy again. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Boris Levin was engaged in a heated argument with his coffee maker. "All right, folks," Anka began, clapping her hands to get their attention. "We've got ourselves a classic first contact scenario, potentially hostile. The Zeecle have decided to drop by for a chat." "Zeecle, great," Boris grumbled, finally giving up on coaxing his coffee into existence. "I just love dealing with aliens whose language sounds like they ate a blender." Amelia looked up with a wry smile. "At least it makes for interesting fieldwork. If by interesting you mean likely to get us all killed, then sure," Anka replied. "What's our next move? We could always try the universal approach," Grayson suggested. "Wave a white flag, hope they don't shoot it out of our hands." "Not likely," Anka said with a shake of her head. "Let's start by sending a transmission, something friendly, non-threatening, like giving a rabid dog a treat. Just hope it's not our arm," Boris muttered. They got to work crafting a message that struck the delicate balance between "hello, neighbor," and "please don't vaporize us." Anka watched the screen with a mixture of anticipation and dread as the signal bounced out into the great cosmic void. Minutes stretched into a small eternity before a response crackled through the static. The Zeecle's voice was calm, almost soothing, if one ignored the underlying threat. "Humans. You tread on divided ground. Leave or face the consequences." "Okay," Anka said, scratching her head. "That doesn't sound like a warm welcome. Suggestions? I say we hightail it out of here," Boris offered, eyes wide with a look that screamed self-preservation. Amelia shook her head. "But think of the scientific value. We could learn so much about their culture, their biology, or we could end up as part of a Zeecle biology experiment," Grayson added. "Pass." Anka considered her options. Running was always appealing, especially when it involved not getting shot. But the mission wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding the division of Bifurca, the mysterious split that seemed to hold the key to something important. "Probably we can't just leave," she finally said, more to herself than anyone else. "Let's see if we can negotiate." "Negotiate with what? Our good looks?" Boris quipped. "Because if so, we're screwed." Anka sighed, turning back to the comms. "Zeecle, this is Captain Anchor Reese. We've no intention of conflict. We're here to study the planet. Bifurca, it's unique." The line went dead for a moment, long enough to make Anka wonder if she'd made a horrible mistake. But then the Zeecle responded, their voice dripping with sarcasm. "Unique, yes, like a knife to the throat is unique." "Hey, I like a good knife analogy as much as the next person," Anka retorted, "but we're not here to cause trouble." "Call it curiosity." "Curiosity killed the cat," the Zeecle replied, their tone icy. "And humans too if they aren't careful." "Well, thank you for the warning," Anka said dryly. "We'll be sure to keep our 9 lives in mind." With the tension in the room thick enough to cut with one of Boris's blunted engineering tools, Anka signaled for the transmission to end. She leaned back in her chair, blowing out a long breath. "Nice work, Captain," Grayson said, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "You might just have a future in alien diplomacy." "Yeah, if I live long enough to get the certificate," Anka replied, rubbing her temples. "So what's our brilliant plan now?" The team exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement that improvisation was the best course of action. After all, plans were for people who expected things to go right. "We monitor them," Amelia suggested, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the unknown. "See if they make the first move. And if that move is to obliterate us," Boris asked, raising an eyebrow. "Then we learn something very valuable," Amelia replied with a shrug. "Not all aliens appreciate curiosity." Great, so we're banking on their restraint, Grayson said, rolling his eyes. Can't wait. Anka stood, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders like a lumpy backpack filled with regret. All right, keep the sensors on them. No sudden moves and definitely no shooting unless they start it. We're explorers, not warmongers. The crew dispersed, leaving Anka alone with her thoughts in the persistent hum of the ship's life support systems. She stared out the viewport at the swirling mists of Bifurca, a planet as enigmatic as it was fascinating. What secrets are you hiding? She wondered aloud. The planet had no answer, at least none that it was willing to share just yet, but it would in time. Whether Anka and her crew would be around to hear it was a different matter entirely. The sound of hurried footsteps broke Anka's reverie. Grayson burst back into the room, his face a mixture of excitement and fear. Captain, the Zeekel ships, they're moving. Anka's heart did a little flip, the kind it usually reserved for vodka or a well-timed sarcastic remark. Towards us or away? Grayson hesitated. Towards. And fast, of course, why would it be anything else? Anka muttered. All right, everyone to battle stations. Let's see what these new friends really want. As the crew scrambled into position, Anka felt the familiar tingle of adrenaline, that ever-present reminder that life was a series of bad decisions and unexpected turns. Any day spent not immediately dying was a good one after all. The Zeekel ships grew larger on the screen, their sleek forms cutting through space like predatory fish swimming through a sea of stars. Graceful, deadly, and probably not interested in sharing their lunch money. Put them on screen, Anka ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing beneath the surface. The main display flickered to life, revealing a Zeekel commander whose expression suggested that friendly negotiation had been the last thing on their mind. Humans, the Zeekel began, their voice as sharp as a blade. You have two choices, leave or stay and face the full force of our armada. Anka smiled, a gesture that held no warmth. Ah, an ultimatum, how original. You really know how to make a girl feel special. The Zeekel's eyes narrowed. Your wit will not save you. No, but it's damn nice to have, Anka replied. I think it's time we discuss terms. The Zeekel seemed to consider this for a moment, their silence a looming presence over the comms. Very well, but know this, we do not tolerate intruders lightly, and we don't break easily, Anka shot back. The transmission ended, leaving Anka and her crew staring at the screen, an uneasy silence filling the room. The Zeekel threat hung over them like a storm cloud, ready to unleash hell at a moment's notice. Well, this is going swimmingly, Boris quipped. Shall we start writing our last wills or wait a bit? Let's hold off, Anka said, a determined glint in her eye. We've still got options. And I've got a feeling this is going to get a whole lot more interesting. As the Zeekel ships continued their approach, Anka couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was only the beginning. Bifurca held its secrets close, and if she played her cards right, she might just be around long enough to uncover them. The situation was dire, the odds stacked against them, but if there was one thing Anka Reese knew, it was that humans were stubborn creatures. And sometimes, stubbornness was all you needed to survive the impossible. The silence in the room was oppressive, like an awkward family dinner, where everyone knows Uncle Pete's got a drinking problem, but nobody's willing to bring it up. Grayson cleared his throat, a nervous tick that made Anka want to punch him just to break the tension. So, what now? He asked, as if she had the script to this cosmic joke tucked in her back pocket. Now we figure out how not to get vaporized, preferably while learning something useful, Anka replied, her eyes fixed on the display as if it might spontaneously sprout answers. Spoiler, it didn't. Boris leaned back in his chair, feet propped up with the casual insolence of someone who'd stopped giving a damn around the third time the coffee maker went on strike. I vote we send them a fruit basket. Nothing says we come in peace like tropical produce, Amelia snorted. What, and risk insulting their dietary customs? Maybe they're allergic to oranges, or maybe they see pineapples as a declaration of war, Grayson added, his tone drier than Bifurca's more barren landscapes. Anka waved a hand, dismissing the fruit folly. Focus, people. We're sitting ducks here, and I doubt the Zeekel are the type to admire the scenery. Grayson's fingers danced over the console, pulling up data with the grace of a man more at home with machines than humans. Captain, I've been monitoring the planet's energy signatures. The two halves north and south Bifurca are showing increased activity. It's like a pair of squabbling siblings both trying to be the favorite. Just what we need, Anka muttered. A planetary custody battle with us as the prize. The screen blinked with new data, graphs and charts painting a picture more abstract than a 5-year-old's finger painting. Amelia peered over Grayson's shoulder, her excitement palpable. Fascinating. The energy spikes suggest a buildup. Could they be gearing up for war? The room went still, everyone digesting that grim possibility like a bad piece of sushi. Great, Boris sighed. Caught between two halves of a pissed-off planet, I knew this mission would be a vacation. Hey, at least it's a change of scenery, Grayson quipped. from imminent vaporization to potential planetary obliteration. Cheerful bunch, aren't we? Anka said, forcing a smile. All right, let's break this down. If the planet's gearing up for war, we're smack dab in the middle of it. Human shields, if you will. Suggestions. We could try contacting both sides, Amelia suggested, her voice tinged with the enthusiasm of someone who'd read one too many adventure novels. See if there's a way to mediate. Yeah, because everyone loves an outsider telling them how to solve their problems, Boris grumbled. Well, unless anyone's got a better idea, Anka said, looking pointedly at her team. No, didn't think so. Grayson, ever the optimist, started tapping at the comms, opening frequencies. Let's hope neither side shoots the messenger. As the ship's comms attempted to bridge the galactic version of a marital spat, Anka drummed her fingers against the console. The Zeekel had made it clear they weren't fans of human intruders, but maybe, just maybe, they weren't fans of planetary annihilation either. Everyone had limits, right? The screen flickered to life with an incoming transmission. The image of a Zeekel commander filled the screen, eyes like twin daggers and about as welcoming. Humans, you are warned. This conflict does not concern you. Funny, it feels pretty concerning from where I'm sitting, Anka replied, adopting her best let's be friends tone. There's got to be a way to resolve this without turning us into space dust. The Zeekel's expression didn't budge. Bifurca is divided. It has always been so. Your presence only complicates matters. Complicates or provides an opportunity. Amelia chimed in, her curiosity overriding her survival instincts. Surely there's a peaceful solution. Peace is for those who can afford it, the Zeekel spat back. We cannot. Then maybe we can help with the bargain, Anka said, her mind racing to keep up with her mouth. A fresh perspective, perhaps, the Zeekel hesitated, a sliver of doubt slicing through their icy demeanor. We will consider your words, but know this interference will not go unpunished. Just another Tuesday, Anka muttered as the transmission ended. She turned to her team, eyes scanning the room for any semblance of a plan. Looks like we've bought some time. Let's hope we can make something of it. Boris rolled his eyes. Sure, because we've done so well so far. Amelia tapped a finger against her chin. If we can divert some of the energy from their weapon systems, it might delay any immediate threat. Give us a chance to talk them down. So, sabotage? Grayson asked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. I prefer creative engineering, Amelia replied with a grin. Let's call it a tactical adjustment. Great, Anka said, the kernel of a plan forming despite her better judgment. Boris, you're on distraction. Grayson, you and Amelia get the tech humming. I want all energy diverted from those guns. Boris grunted, pushing up from his chair. Time to see if my coffee maker experience pays off. Anka watched her crew spring into action, their movements a blur of determination and desperation. They worked in tandem, a ragtag orchestra playing a symphony of survival. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it was this mismatched bunch of caffeine-fueled misfits. While the others busied themselves with their tasks, Anka stayed glued to the viewport, her eyes tracing the planet's fractal landscapes. Bifurca's beauty was a deceptive thing, like a poisoned flower luring an unsuspecting prey. What are you playing at? She whispered to the planet, half expecting an answer. The ship shuddered as the Zeekel closed in, a warning shot across the bow to remind them just how unwelcome they were. No pressure, she called over her shoulder. Boris was elbow-deep in circuitry, his muttered curses a testament to the ship's less-than-stellar condition. This old bucket better hold together, he grumbled, or it's gonna be our funeral. Grayson and Amelia huddled over a console, their fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon and the speed of a caffeine addict. Redirecting power now, Grayson reported, his voice tense but steady. Let's give them a light show they'll never forget. The ship's systems hummed with renewed energy, the dim lights flickering to life in a defiant blaze of illumination. Anka felt a surge of hope, fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, they'd live to fight another day. The Zeekel's ships loomed outside, their shadows long and menacing against the backdrop of space. Anka knew they had minutes, if that, before the Zeekel made their next move. Hold on, folks, she warned, bracing herself for the inevitable. The comms crackled, and the Zeekel's voice sliced through the static. You try our patience, humans. This is your last warning. Good thing we're slow learners, Anka quipped, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. We just want to talk. The Zeekel's response was a cascade of energy signatures, their weapon systems primed for a symphony of destruction. But before they could unleash hell, Bifurca itself intervened. The planet's surface rippled like a pond caught in a storm, the energy signatures peaking and converging in a brilliant, terrifying display. What the hell? Boris breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's the planet, Amelia said, her voice a mix of awe and dread. It's waking up, and it doesn't look happy. Anka's mind raced, the pieces falling into place with an alarming clarity. Bifurca wasn't just a battleground, it was a living, breathing entity, and it was done playing nice. "Brace for impact," she shouted, gripping the console as the ship bucked like a wild beast. The energy wave hit them like a tidal force, the ship shuddering and groaning under the strain. Anka held on for dear life, her teeth rattling in her skull as the universe tilted and spun. When the wave passed, leaving silence in its wake, Anka dared to open her eyes. The Zeekel ships hung in space, their weapons silenced, their aggression temporarily quelled by the planet's wrath. "What just happened?" Grayson asked, his voice shaky but alive. "Bifurca happened," Anka replied, her heart still racing. "And I think it's trying to tell us something." The Zeekel's image flickered back onto the screen, their expression one of grim acknowledgement. "The planet has chosen. We will withdraw for now." Anka nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. "Let's keep it that way." As the Zeekel ships retreated into the void, Anka knew their respite was temporary, but in that moment it was enough. Bifurca's secrets were still shrouded in mystery, but they'd taken the first step toward understanding. As the tension in the room dissipated, Boris let out a long breath. "Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again." "Seconded," Grayson said, his tone lighter than it had been in days. Anka allowed herself a small smile. "We're not out of the woods yet. But at least we're still in the game." Amelia leaned back in her chair, her eyes shining with the wonder of discovery. "There's so much more to learn, and so much more to not die from," Anka added dryly. "But yeah, one step at a time." As the crew settled back into the rhythm of survival, Anka turned her gaze back to the planet. Bifurca's mysteries were far from solved, but she'd be damned if she was going to let a hostile planet and a trigger-happy alien race get the better of her. They were humans, after all, stubborn, irreverent, and just crazy enough to make it out alive. Captain Anka Reese stood at the helm of their beleaguered ship, the universe's least reliable tin can, as her crew regrouped. The air was thick with relief and the lingering scent of Boris's burnt coffee. "Well, that went better than expected," Anka said, the words tasting like someone else's optimism. Boris snorted from his position by the console. "If by better you mean we're still breathing, then sure." "Better? Don't be so negative," Grayson piped in, shooting Boris a look that could only be described as optimistically sarcastic. "We could have been reduced to cosmic confetti. That's a plus, right?" Boris shrugged, noncommittal as ever. "I'd rather not be the universe's next art project, thanks." "Enough existential debates," Anka interjected, straightening up. "We've got work to do." That energy spike from Bifurca wasn't just a tantrum. There's something more down there. "You mean besides the homicidal planet and the Zeekel with impressive anger management issues?" Boris grumbled, picking at the console like it might bite. "Exactly," Anka replied, squinting at the scrambled readouts. The screens flickered like they were on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Amelia, you're the science brain. Any ideas on what Bifurca might be hiding, Doctor?" Amelia Park, who had been multitasking between doodling alien anatomies and daydreaming about scientific discoveries, snapped to attention. "If Bifurca is sentient, it might have developed tech to communicate or defend itself." "Great, it's not just a planet, it's a paranoid planet," Boris muttered. "Next, it'll start posting passive-aggressive notes. More like aggressive-aggressive," Grayson said, shaking his head. Those energy spikes felt personal. "Imagine being so pissed off you develop complex technology just to tell people to bugger off," Anka mused. "Sounds like half my exes. Maybe there's a way to tap into this tech," Amelia suggested with the enthusiasm of a scientist who hadn't yet been disillusioned by reality. "If we can understand it, we might communicate with Bifurca." Grayson looked dubious. "And what? Ask it nicely to not kill us all." "A novel approach," Boris said with a wry smile. "Though I doubt a planet listens to reason." "Right, because everything else in this galaxy is so reasonable," Anka shot back. "But in the absence of a better plan, let's go with it. Amelia, you're on research. Grayson, see if you can enhance our comms to pick up any planetary chatter." "Roger that, Captain," Grayson said, his fingers already dancing over the keys like a caffeine-fueled concert pianist. "And Boris," Anka added, turning to the engineer who was still engaged in a cold war with his coffee maker, "keep this bucket of bolts together. We might need to make a quick exit." Boris gave a half-hearted salute. "I'll see if I can duct tape our dignity back together." While the crew set to work, Anka leaned back in her chair, pondering the strange fate that had brought them here. A planetary mystery with a side of alien hostility was not the vacation she'd imagined. But then, her life had never been about cruising through the galaxy sipping margaritas. As the minutes crawled by, Amelia's face lit up with the glow of discovery. "I've got something," she exclaimed, almost bouncing in her seat like a kid on planet-wide candy day. Anka peered at the screens, where a chaotic swirl of data was now resolving into something resembling a pattern. "What are we looking at, Doc?" "Subsurface structures," Amelia said, her voice alight with curiosity. "There are ancient tech signatures buried within Bifurca. It's like the planet's got a network of sorts." "Great, a planet with Wi-Fi," Boris quipped. "Now we just need the password." Let's hope it's not Die Humans Die 123, Grayson added, adjusting the comms to hone in on the tech signals. Can we access it? Anka asked, cutting to the chase. Amelia nodded, though her enthusiasm was tempered by caution. Possibly. But we might need to get closer. Closer to the planet that's already tried to swat us like flies, Boris asked, skepticism dripping from every word. Exactly, Anka said with grim cheer. Mount up, folks, we're going in. The ship shuddered as they began their descent, buffeted by the unpredictable surges of Bifurca's atmosphere. The controls fought back like a toddler in a tantrum, but Anka held her grip steady. Boris, how's she holding up? Like a house of cards in a hurricane, Boris replied, but he was already working his magic on the stabilizers. Comforting, Anka said, her voice dry as desert sand. Incoming data stream, Grayson announced. Looks like we've tapped into something. Amelia leaned forward, eyes glued to the console. It's like a conversation, frequencies interlacing. Almost musical. Maybe it's a mixtape, Boris said. Planetary breakup ballads. Can we decode it? Anka asked, ignoring Boris's attempt at humor. Grayson frowned, typing furiously. Working on it. It's complex, like someone mashed up a Beethoven symphony with a toddler's tantrum. Sounds like my childhood, Anka quipped, but her eyes remained serious, fixed on the unfolding mystery. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Grayson and Amelia worked to tease out meaning from the chaos. Finally, Grayson let out a triumphant shout. Got it. You sure? Anka asked, leaning over his shoulder. Well, it's not going to win any Grammy Awards, but it's definitely a signal, Grayson said with a grin. Amelia clapped her hands together, her eyes gleaming. It's a distress call. Bifurca's hurting and it's crying out for help. A distressed planet. That's a first, Boris said, scratching his head. How do we even begin to help something like that? By not getting blown up, for starters, Anka replied. Any chance we can send a response? Amelia hesitated, biting her lip. It's risky. We don't fully understand the tech, and making contact could trigger anything being more attempts to kill us, Boris added helpfully. Always the optimist, Anka said, rolling her eyes. But it's a risk we have to take. Open a channel, see if we can make some interplanetary friends. As they transmitted their carefully crafted message, the ship's comms crackled ominously. Anka held her breath, waiting for the universe's next cruel trick. What did you say in the message? Boris asked, eyeing the console like it might explode. Something simple, Amelia replied, her voice barely concealing her nerves. We hear you. What do you need? Subtle, Boris said with a snort. Very human. The ship shuddered again, and for a moment Anka feared they'd angered Bifurca further. But then the console pinged with an incoming response. The data was garbled, a mess of signals that made no sense at first glance. Can we make sense of this? Anka asked, her fingers drumming a nervous tattoo on the armrest. Grayson and Amelia exchanged a look, then got to work. The rest of the crew watched, the ship quiet but for the hum of the engines and the rapid clicking of keys. Slowly, as if unraveling a tightly wound knot, the data began to resolve into something coherent. It's a blueprint, Grayson said, disbelief coloring his voice. A blueprint for what? Anka pressed, her curiosity piqued. For a device, Amelia said, eyes wide with wonder. Something ancient, powerful. It could stabilize Bifurca, possibly even pacify it, or blow us all to hell, Boris chimed in. There's always that, Anka agreed, but it's a chance worth taking. The vehicle won't wait forever, Grayson warned. They'll be back and they'll be even less inclined to chat. Then let's get to work, Anka said, determination stealing her voice. Amelia, you're on the blueprint. Figure out what we need to build this thing. And Boris, she continued, turning to the engineer, make sure we have enough power to keep this ship in the air. I don't fancy crash landing on a sentient planet. As you wish, Captain, Boris said with a mock salute, but there was a grudging respect in his eyes. As the crew set to work, Anka allowed herself a moment of reflection. They were on the brink of something monumental, a discovery that could change everything. Yet the risks were enormous, and one misstep could spell their doom. Here's to playing nice with the planet, she murmured under her breath, a sardonic smile tugging at her lips. With a final nod to her team, Anka turned her eyes back to Bifurca, ready to face whatever came next. They'd come too far to turn back now, and if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving the impossible. As the ship buzzed with activity and the crew worked to decode the mysteries of Bifurca, Anka felt a flicker of hope, a small, stubborn flame in the darkness. They were far from safe, but for the first time in a long time, they had a fighting chance. Captain Anka Reese drummed a tattoo on the ship's armrest with her fingers, a habit she'd picked up from her academy days. They'd once called her the annoying metronome for it. Now, it was the only thing keeping her focused as chaos unfolded around them. News from Bifurca wasn't just bad. It was colossally catastrophic, like finding out your dentist moonlighted as a butcher. The vehicle, everyone's least favorite aggressive tourist, had tried cracking open Bifurca's core like a cosmic piñata. Apparently the planet hadn't taken kindly to this celestial assault, and the energy spikes, once mere nuisances, now threatened to rip spacetime a new one. Anka's comm beeped, and Lieutenant Grayson's chipper voice sliced through the tension like a knife through soft butter. "Captain, I've got news." "It's both worse and, well, still worse." "Fantastic," Anka sighed. "Tell me more, I love a good horror story." The Zekel's attempt to invade Bifurca's core backfired. Think of it like poking a hornet's nest with a very short stick. Now it's buzzing and ready to sting. "Wonderful, just what we need. A planet-sized hornet," Anka replied, rolling her eyes. "What's the damage?" Well, the Zekel didn't just get a slap on the wrist. They got a full planetary bitch slap. Energy spikes are off the charts, worse than a kid on a sugar high. Anka groaned inwardly. "Any chance of visiting the peaceful side of the galaxy next time? If we live to see it," Grayson replied. "But hey, I hear the scenery is to die for." Anka stood, her demeanor shifting from sarcasm to strategy. "Amelia Boris report, Doctor." Amelia Park's face appeared on the screen, a mix of curiosity and worry. "Captain, those subsurface structures are screaming distress signals now. It's a miracle we haven't been vaporized yet," Boris added, strolling in with his characteristic nonchalance, the ships holding together like a patchwork quilt. "One strong gust and we'll be pieces in the galactic breeze. So we're basically a sitting duck in a shooting gallery," Anka said, summarizing their predicament with grim amusement. "Can we build this stabilization device, or whatever it's supposed to be, before we're planetary toast?" Amelia hesitated, her enthusiasm tempered by the reality of imminent death. "Possibly. But it's experimental tech, and I'd need to decode more from Bifurca's blueprint. It's like trying to read a book written by a really angry alien." "Great," Boris chimed, scratching his stubbled chin. "And I suppose we're on a clock." "Tick-tock," Grayson added helpfully, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Anka rubbed her temples, her headache blossoming like a star going supernova. "All right, let's focus. Amelia, keep working on that blueprint. Boris, see if you can reinforce our systems long enough to give her a chance." "On it," Boris said with a mock salute, his voice heavy with sarcasm. "I'll make sure we're not hitting the eject button mid-operation." As her team dispersed to their tasks, Anka settled back in her chair, trying to cobble together a plan from the mess of their current situation. She didn't have much love for the Zekel, no one did, really, but watching them get vaporized by a MIF planet wasn't exactly on her bucket list either. "Captain," Grayson's voice cut through her thoughts again, "Bifurca's response signals are intensifying. I think it's inviting us, or maybe just daring us to try something." "Nice to know the planet's got a sense of humor," Anka muttered. "All right, Grayson, keep those lines open. If Bifurca wants to chat, let's make sure we don't miss the call." "Will do," Grayson replied, his fingers flying over the console. "Let's hope it's a friendly tone." Anka snorted, standing once more. "Friendly planets. Next, you'll tell me unicorns exist." As she walked the bridge, checking on each station, her mind was a whirl of strategy and snark. They needed allies, or at least someone else to stand between them and Bifurca's wrath, and given the Zekel's current predicament, they might just find common ground with their frequent foes. Minutes later, Boris returned, a glint of excitement or madness in his eyes. "Captain, I think I've got something." "Is it a warranty for this heap?" Anka asked, one eyebrow cocked. "Better," Boris said, a grin spreading across his face. "I've jury-rigged a signal booster. We can piggyback on Bifurca's energy spikes to amplify our own transmissions." "And why would we want to shout our location to the galaxy?" Anka asked. "We don't," Boris explained, his excitement palpable. "But if we can tweak the frequency, we might get the Zekel's attention. Offer a truce." "Temporary, of course," Anka considered this. "A truce with the Zekel. That's like making friends with a rabid dog." "True," Boris admitted, "but it beats being an interstellar chew toy." Anka nodded, seeing the logic through the insanity. "All right, do it. Send them a message and make it clear we're not here to join the cosmic barbecue." As Boris set to work, Anka couldn't help but marvel at her crew. Here they were hurtling toward potential oblivion, and they still had the gall to laugh in the face of doom. It was both reassuring and terrifying. Grayson's console beeped, a notification flashing. "Incoming message, Captain." "Let's hear it," Anka said, bracing for the worst. The voice that crackled through sounded like it had gargled gravel for breakfast. "Human vessel, cease your interference." "The Zekel demand," Anka cut in, her tone icy. "Demand all you want, but unless you fancy being reduced to atomic particles, we suggest a different approach." There was a pause, the kind that stretched longer than it should. "You propose a ceasefire." "For now," Anka replied, her voice steady. "We've both got a problem with Bifurca. Maybe not getting vaporized is a mutual goal." Another pause, this one shorter. "Very well, but know this, the Zekel will not forgive any betrayal." "Trust me," Anka said, a smile in her voice. "Betrayal's way down on my list of priorities." As the line went dead, Anka felt a strange sense of relief. It was a twisted alliance, sure, but in this universe, you took what you could get. With the Zekel begrudgingly onside, their chances of pulling off this insane plan increased. Okay team, Anka announced, rallying her crew. We've got a temporary truce with the vehicle. Let's not waste it. Amelia, how's that blueprint coming? Faster than expected, Captain, Amelia replied, though her focus was still on her screens. With this temporary reprieve, I might just figure out how to actually build this thing. Good. And Boris, make sure that signal booster doesn't explode. It won't, Boris said, though his grin suggested the opposite. Probably. Anka shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. Let's get to work, people. We've got a planet to stabilize. The ship buzzed with renewed energy as the crew dove into their tasks, each member fueled by the promise of survival, even if the odds were slim. Anka watched them, pride mixing with the ever-present tension. Here they were, a motley crew on a battered ship, facing down a sentient planet and its alien aggressors. If they pulled this off, it'd be a story to tell over a drink. And if not, well, at least they'd go down with a bang and a laugh. As time ticked on, Anka checked in with Grayson. Any word from our not-so-friendly allies? Radio silence, Grayson replied, but that's better than incoming fire. True, Anka conceded. Let's keep it that way. The minutes stretched, the ship's interior a hive of controlled chaos. Each step forward felt like treading on a razor's edge, but the crew was focused, determined. They were used to dangerous situations, but this was on another level, a chance to prove that humanity could outsmart even the most bizarre adversities. Amelia's voice broke through the tension. Captain, I've finally got it. The blueprint, it's for a planetary stabilizer, a sort of cosmic reset button. Sounds promising, Anka said, leaning over to see the schematics. How does it work? Well, Amelia began, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. We harness Bifurca's own energy spikes, channel them through the device, and if we're lucky, stabilize its core. And if we're not lucky, Boris asked, ever the pessimist. We'll add planetary fireworks to our list of unfortunate last sights, Amelia said with a shrug. So a win-win, Anka quipped, though her mind was already racing with possibilities. All right, let's get this thing built. The crew sprang into action, the ship's corridors echoing with hurried footsteps and shouted instructions. Each member played their part, from Grayson's deft communication adjustments to Boris's engineering prowess. Anka coordinated, ensuring every piece fit into the puzzle that was their survival. As they worked, Anka couldn't help but admire their resilience. Here they were, tinkering with alien tech on the edge of oblivion, and they hadn't lost their nerve or their humor. It was a testament to their spirit, a defiant middle finger to the universe. Yet even in their scramble, the tension mounted. The vehicle's silence was both a blessing and a curse. Their absence meant time, but also uncertainty. Anka would have preferred a clear enemy to this uneasy alliance. Finally, as the ship hummed with the energy of desperation and ingenuity, Boris straightened, wiping sweat and grease from his brow. The device is ready, Captain. Just a matter of plugging it in and hoping Bifurca doesn't take offense. Great, Anka replied, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. Time to put on our big kid pants and get this done, Grayson piped up, his tone uncharacteristically serious. And if it doesn't work, Anka met his gaze, her voice steady. Then we go out the way we lived, kicking, screaming, and laughing in the face of it all. As they prepared to deploy the device, Anka allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. They were about to do something insane, and the odds were stacked against them. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was making the impossible possible. All right, team, she said, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. Let's save a planet, stick it to the vehicle, and maybe, just maybe, live to tell the tale. The ship shuddered as they moved into position, the weight of their gamble pressing down on them. But Anka felt a flicker of hope, small, stubborn, and enough to fuel their final push. They were far from heroes, but they were all they had, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The ship's metal guts hummed with nervous energy as the crew scrambled to slap together Amelia's planetary stabilizer. Captain Anka Reese watched it all with the expression of someone who'd just been handed a live grenade and told to play fetch. Their temporary alliance with the vehicle was a flimsy bridge built over a lava pit, and she wasn't keen on taking a stroll. But here they were, in the shadow of a split-personality planet throwing a cosmic tantrum. Anka couldn't help but appreciate the grim irony, a planet fighting itself with them caught squarely in the middle. Bifurca's warring halves were like an old married couple who'd taken, till death do us part, a bit too literally. Boris, how's that stabilizer looking? Anka asked, tapping her fingers on the armrest with her usual nervous energy. Boris was buried up to his elbows in circuitry, his greasy hands moving like a conjurer's. It looks like a big pile of maybe. You know, the usual, that's the spirit, Anka replied dryly. Grayson appeared at her elbow, a perpetual smile plastered on his face despite the situation. Captain, I just love what you've done with the place, he quipped, gesturing at the chaos around them. Yeah, I'm thinking of putting it on the market as a fixer-upper, Anka shot back. How are friends out there? Grayson shrugged, his fingers dancing across the console. The vehicle haven't shot us yet, so that's something. Maybe they're just shy or too busy not getting vaporized. Let's keep it that way, Anka said, her voice laced with resolve. I'd rather not find out how Zeekle hospitality tastes. Across the bridge, Amelia was deep in conversation with a holographic display. Her work appeared more arcane than scientific, a dance of light and numbers. Captain, I think I've found a way to sync our systems with Bifurca's energy spikes, she announced, enthusiasm barely masking the underlying tension. And that means what exactly? Anka asked, raising an eyebrow. Think of it like catching a wave, Amelia explained, her voice the excited chatter of someone who'd just solved a puzzle. We ride the spikes, give Bifurca a cosmic lullaby, coax it back to sleep. So we're singing a planet a bedtime story. Neat, do we have time for lullaby? Anka asked, her humor dark as usual. Better than a funeral dirge, Amelia replied, a glint of mischief in her eye. Anka nodded, appreciating a woman who could laugh as the universe burned around them. All right, let's make it happen. Boris, make sure that stabilizer doesn't do what it was born to do. Explode, you mean? Boris shot back, grinning. I'll see what I can do. As the crew worked, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Friendly reminder, Grayson chimed in. Bifurca's energy spikes are spiking harder. We've got a front row seat to the apocalypse. Lovely, Anka muttered. Exactly what I wanted to hear. The ship rocked suddenly, sending a cascade of tools clattering across the deck. Anka tightened her grip on her chair, barking orders to keep everyone steady. Status, nothing that requires spacesuits, Grayson replied, ever the optimist. Just the planet throwing a fit. Right, Anka said, gritting her teeth. Let's settle it down before it kicks us out of its orbit. While the crew wrestled with the ship's temperamental systems, Anka's mind was a whirl of chaos and stubborn hope. Her job was to keep them alive, but the galaxy had a perverse sense of humor when it came to survival odds. And yet, despite the absurdity, she felt a flicker of determination. Amelia, how about that cosmic lullaby? Amelia looked up, eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. We're as ready as we'll ever be, Captain, she said, her voice a blend of excitement and dread. Anka took a breath, steeling herself for whatever came next. All right, team, let's put this plan into action and hope we don't end up as a particularly gruesome entry in a Zeekle bedtime story. Boris punched a few final commands into the console, his expression one of a man holding back a sneer at fate. Just another day in paradise, he muttered, flipping a switch. The ship juddered violently, a shuddering ripple that ran through its bones. Anka held her breath, waiting for the universe to make up its mind. Stabilizers live, Boris announced, his voice barely audible over the ship's rumble. Grayson whooped, though his enthusiasm was more gallows cheer than genuine celebration. And Bifurca's listening in, he said, monitoring the energy feeds. Anka leaned forward, willing the patchwork tech to work its magic. It was a gamble, a desperate play on a board stacked against them, but if humans were good at anything, it was making the impossible happen through sheer will and maybe a little gallows humor. Amelia, Anka prompted, eyes fixed on the display. Spikes are evening out, Amelia replied, her voice an anchor in the storm. We might just pull this off. Anka allowed herself a rare moment of hope, though she wasn't quite ready to break out the champagne, metaphorically speaking, of course. They were still in the thick of it, and she wasn't keen on counting chickens that hadn't hatched. The ship gradually steadied, the wild energy spikes from Bifurca's core beginning to harmonize under the influence of Amelia's cosmic lullaby. But before relief could fully set in, Grayson's voice sliced through the moment. Incoming transmission from the Zeekle, he announced, his usual chipper tone carrying an undercurrent of tension. Seems they finally found their voice. Let's hear it, Anka said, bracing herself for whatever venom the Zeekle were about to spew. The comms crackled, and a voice as abrasive as sandpaper filled the bridge. Human vessel, your actions have consequences. The Zeekle do not take kindly to interference. Anka resisted the urge to roll her eyes. We're not here to make friends, she replied, her tone matching the Zeekle's grit. But unless you fancy being atomized, you might want to let us finish the job. Another pause. Anka imagined the Zeekle on the other end, weighing their options. Finally, the voice returned, grudgingly conceding. Proceed, but know this, our patience is measured in moments. Good to know you've got a stopwatch handy, Anka retorted, cutting the line before they could respond. Charming, Boris said, clapping his hands metaphorically. Glad to see interstellar diplomacy is alive and well, Anka snorted. I'll be sure to send a fruit basket. Now let's focus on not getting obliterated. As the minutes crawled by, the stabilizer continued its work, gradually calming Bifurca's volatile energy. The crew moved with renewed purpose, each member playing their part in a shared dance of survival. Yet even as they worked, the toll of the situation weighed heavily on them. It was written in the lines of tension across Amelia's forehead, the tightness in Boris's usually relaxed frame, the uncharacteristic seriousness in Grayson's eyes. Captain, Grayson said, breaking the silence, if we manage this, drinks are on you. Anka chuckled, the sound both weary and defiant. If we manage this, Grayson, you can have the whole damn bottle. As the stabilizer continued to do its work, the ship began to feel less like a coffin and more like a lifeline. Bifurca's energy spikes flattened, a slow but steady heartbeat of reconciliation. Looks like it's working, Amelia said, her voice a balm against the nerves. We might just pull this off. Don't jinx it, Boris warned, though his expression was one of hope rather than doubt. Anka nodded, her heart pounding with the dual beat of fear and optimism. Let's get this done. We've got a planet to save, even if it's just to spite the Zeekel. They continued, time blurring as they fought against odds that would have made lesser beings crumble. But they weren't lesser beings, they were human, stubbornly clinging to life with grit and gallows humor. And slowly, as if the universe had decided to throw them a bone, Bifurca began to settle. The energy spikes smoothed into a low hum, the planet's warring halves finding an uneasy truce. It's working, Amelia said, disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. It's really working. Anka allowed herself a brief smile, the kind that carried the weight of worlds. Never doubted you for a second, she said, though they both knew it was a lie. Grayson let out a whoop, echoing through the ship. We did it, Captain, we really did it. The bridge erupted into laughter and cheers, a moment of pure, unadulterated relief. They'd pulled it off, defied the odds, and lived to tell the tale. But even as they celebrated, Anka knew the game was far from over. The Zeekel were still out there, and Bifurca's calm was a fragile thing. But for now, just for a moment, they allowed themselves to hope. All right, team, Anka said, her voice carrying above the cheers. Let's get out of here before Bifurca changes its mind. As they prepared to leave, Anka took one last look at the planet on their screens. For better or worse, they'd left their mark. And maybe, just maybe, they'd bought themselves a little more time to find a way to make that mark count. They were far from safe, but they were alive. And in this unforgiving universe, that was victory enough. The ship's interior echoed like a tin can in a hailstorm as Anka paced the bridge, her fingers drumming a relentless beat on her thigh. Beneath the veneer of jokes and banter, the crew was worn thin, like a favorite coat on its last threads. But hell, if they were going to unravel, they'd do it with style. Captain, I've got something. Amelia's voice cut through the clatter of the ship. I've been analyzing the energy patterns, and I think I've found a critical weakness in the connection between North and South Bifurca. Anka stopped her pacing. You mean like a loose tooth we can yank? More like a crack in the wall, Amelia replied, bringing up a hologram of Bifurca on the main display. The two halves are connected by a sort of energy umbilical cord. If we give it a good enough shove, we send the whole cosmic toddler into timeout, Anka finished, a grin breaking through her usual cynicism. Boris leaned over the console, eyes narrowed as if he could will the ship's temper to settle by sheer force of disdain. And what do we use to nudge a planet's tantrum? Amelia's eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and madness. We can overload the stabilizer with a feedback loop. It'll be like giving Bifurca a shot of adrenaline. Enough to disrupt the connection temporarily. Grayson's smile was back, if a bit more sardonic than usual. Sounds like we're about to slap Bifurca with the universe's biggest alarm clock. Just the sort of wake-up call I'd want, Anka said dryly. But can we do it without tearing the ship apart? Amelia shrugged, a gesture that said maybe with an unhealthy dose of we're screwed either way. We'll have to time it just right. Too little and we annoy it, too much and we might as well start practicing our ghost impressions. Lovely, Anka muttered. Let's prepare that cosmic wake-up call. Boris, get intimate with that stabilizer, make it sing, or scream, Boris added, already moving to the engineering console with a sense of begrudging purpose. Anka turned her attention back to the display. The holographic image of Bifurca spun slowly, each half locked in a silent battle of wills. It was oddly beautiful, like watching a knife fight from a safe distance. Grayson, keep an eye on the Zeekel. If they start getting twitchy, I want to know before they get trigger-happy. Roger that, Captain. I'll charm them with my winning personality, Anka snorted. Just don't get us invited to any of their dinner parties. The crew settled into a tense rhythm, each member focused on their task. The bridge buzzed with the kind of anxious energy that usually preceded either a brilliant victory or a spectacular failure, not that there was much difference in their line of work. Anka, Amelia said, her voice a quiet thread amidst the chaos. I've adjusted the energy parameters. We're ready to overload the stabilizer on your mark. Anka nodded, her fingers resuming their restless drumming. All right, folks, this is it. We're taking the universe's worst babysitting job and hitting the eject button. Everyone ready? There were nods all around, each tinged with an edge of gallows humor. This was what they did, stared down the infinite abyss and laughed in its face. Even if the laugh came out more like a wheeze. Boris, initiate the feedback loop. Feedback loop engaging, he replied, fingers dancing over the console like a pianist playing the last notes of a dirge. The ship hummed, a low vibration that tickled the bones. Anka felt it in her teeth, a sensation that was both unsettling and strangely exhilarating. For a brief moment, she wondered if this was what it felt like to balance on the edge of a supernova. Energy levels rising, Grayson reported, his voice the cheerleader of doom. The hum grew louder, resonating with the ship's metal frame. Anka could almost hear Bifurca stirring, like a giant waking from a long sleep, unsure if it wanted breakfast or to crush anything in reach. On my mark, Anka said, watching the energy readings climb. Her heart matched the rhythm, a drumbeat of tension and defiance. 3, 2, 1, now, Boris hit the final command and the stabilizer roared to life, sending a shockwave of energy towards Bifurca's core. It was electric savagery at its finest, a symphony of chaos and raw power. The ship shuddered violently, protesting the abuse. Anka clung to her seat, teeth gritted as inertia fought to fling her into the void. Around her the crew held on, faces set in determination mingled with a touch of mania. Energy spike achieved, Amelia called out, her voice rising above the chaos. Connection between the halves is destabilizing, Grayson added, his tone a mix of surprise and triumph. We've done it, Anka allowed herself a moment of triumph, though it was tempered with the knowledge that they were far from safe. All right, everyone, let's hold this together. We've pissed off a planet. Now all we need is to survive its tantrum. The stabilizer continued to pulse, each wave of energy further unraveling the delicate balance between North and South Bifurca. It was like watching a high-wire act where the wire had decided enough was enough. Keep monitoring those energy levels, Anka instructed, her focus unyielding. They were treading on the edge of oblivion, and she wasn't going to let them fall off without a fight. As the minutes dragged on, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Every creak of the ship, every flicker of the lights was scrutinized as if the universe had hidden a punchline in the chaos. Then, just as the ship seemed on the brink of tearing itself apart, the energy readings began to stabilize. The chaotic spikes smoothed into a rhythmic pulse, echoing through the ship like a heartbeat. It's working, Amelia said, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. The connection is broken. The halves are disengaging. Anka exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The bridge erupted in laughter and cheers, a release of tension that was as much relief as it was defiance. Congratulations, team, Anka said, her voice carrying above the noise. We've just given a planet a timeout, and lived to tell the tale, Grayson added, his grin wide enough to be seen from orbit. Boris leaned back from the console, wiping a trace of sweat from his brow. Remind me never to volunteer for babysitting duty again, Anka chuckled, the sound tinged with exhaustion. I'll add that to your list of crew demands, right under preferential coffee treatment. Speaking of which, Boris replied, a wicked twinkle in his eyes, the coffee maker and I have reached an understanding. Peace in our time, Grayson quipped, earning a round of laughter. Amelia was still at the display, her expression a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Captain, she said quietly, we really did it. Anka nodded, her heart swelling with pride for her crew, her friends. Yeah, we did. Now let's get out of here before the Zeekel decide they've had enough of our shenanigans. As the ship prepared to leave Bifurca's orbit, Anka took one last look at the split planet on the screen. They'd managed to turn the tide for now. But the universe had a nasty habit of not letting victories last. Grayson, plot a course away from here. I'd rather not stick around for the encore. Course plotted, Captain, he replied, his hands dancing over the console with the ease of someone who'd been born to fly. The ship began to move, each vibration a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. They'd faced down the chaos of a sentient planet and lived to tell the tale. And maybe, just maybe, they'd bought themselves a little more time to figure out what the hell came next. As they sailed away from Bifurca, Anka felt a new resolve settle in. They were far from safe, with enemies around every corner and the universe itself a fickle beast. But they were alive, they were human. And they'd keep fighting, keep laughing in the face of despair, until the stars themselves went cold. All right, crew, Anka said, her voice carrying the warmth of camaraderie. Next stop, anywhere but here. Let's see what other nightmares the galaxy's got in store for us. Can't wait, Boris muttered, though his grin was infectious. And as the ship sped into the dark, Anka felt the weight of their shared defiance, their shared hope, and found it was enough. The ship drifted through the void, leaving the chaos of Bifurca in its wake. Anka watched the planet recede on the display, feeling a mix of relief and trepidation. They'd given Bifurca one hell of a wake-up call, but there was no telling how long the peace would last. It was like grounding a teenager with a penchant for setting things on fire, effective for now, but watch out for the next explosion. All right, crew, Anka said, her voice a blend of exhaustion and determination. We've pissed off a planet and survived. Now let's see if we can charm a bunch of Zeekel into not turning us into cosmic roadkill. Grayson rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair with the casual air of someone who'd stared down death and found it a bit overhyped. Nothing like a good old-fashioned diplomatic nightmare to end the day. Can't wait to see what delightful surprises they have in store for us. Remember, Amelia chimed in from her station. The Zeekle aren't known for their hospitality. Unless you count being thrown into a pit with rabid space ferrets as a warm welcome. Boris snorted, leaning against the wall with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent too long in space and found solid ground overrated. Well, I'm sure your sparkling personalities will win them over. Anka gave a sardonic smile, fingers drumming a restless rhythm on her chair. We just have to convince them that keeping the universe in one piece is in everyone's best interest, or at least that shooting us won't help. The comms crackled, Lieutenant Grayson's voice cutting through with the kind of forced cheer that belonged on a children's TV show. Captain, we've got incoming. Zeekle ships on an intercept course. Looks like they want to have a little chat. Anka sighed, her fingers pausing mid-drum. All right, let's see if we can keep this from turning into a cosmic bar fight. Grayson, open a channel. The main display flickered, and the stern visage of a Zeekle commander filled the screen. He looked like someone who'd just found out his favorite planet was out of stock. Anka could relate. This is Commander Thrax of the Zeekle fleet, the alien growled, his voice like gravel being dragged across a chalkboard. Explain yourselves, humans. Anka leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral. Commander Thrax, nice to see you too. We had a bit of a situation with Bifurca. Think of it as cosmic anger management. The commander's eyes narrowed, like he was considering whether to incinerate them now or later. You've interfered with the natural order. The Zeekle do not take kindly to such meddling. Funny, neither do we, Anka replied, her tone dry as a desert. But we all know that Bifurca's halves were about to turn the galaxy into their personal playground. We just gave them a timeout. Thrax's nostrils flared, and for a moment Anka wondered if she'd pushed too far. But then the commander's lips twitched, almost like he was trying not to smile. You humans are reckless, maybe. Dead, not yet, Anka said, letting a small smile tug at her lips. We've got a chance here, Commander. A chance to stop a war that's been raging for far too long. The Zeekle commander fell silent, his gaze piercing through the screen. Anka held her breath, waiting for judgment, for the decision that would tip their fates one way or another. Finally, Thrax spoke, his tone grudgingly respectful. You propose a ceasefire, Anka nodded, feeling the weight of the universe on her shoulders. We do. Let's give Bifurca's halves time to cool off. We'll help them find a way to coexist that doesn't involve reducing entire systems to rubble. A pause stretched between them, heavy with the potential for both peace and disaster. Anka watched as Thrax considered, weighing options like a merchant balancing scales. Very well, Thrax finally said, his voice a low rumble. We will agree to your proposal. But make no mistake, human. If this fails, the Zeekle will not hesitate to finish what we started. Anka nodded, relief and tension warring within her. Understood, Commander. Let's see if we can manage not to blow each other up for a change. The screen flickered off, leaving the bridge in a tense silence. Anka exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of their fragile peace settle like a heavy cloak. Well, that went better than expected, Grayson said, breaking the silence with his usual nonchalance. Yeah, Anka replied, allowing herself a moment of optimism. We've got a breathing room. Let's make the most of it. Boris stretched, cracking his knuckles in a way that suggested he'd rather be wrestling with engines than diplomacy. So what's the plan, Captain? Besides not getting vaporized, we do what we do best, Anka said, her resolve hardening. We use our outsider perspective to bridge the gap between Bifurca's halves. Show them there's more to life than endless war. Sounds like a tall order, Amelia remarked, though her eyes gleamed with determination. But then, when have we ever taken the easy route, Anka chuckled, a sound tinged with exhaustion and hope. Never. And I'm damn proud of it. The ship moved through the stars, a small beacon of defiance in the vastness of space. Anka knew they were far from safe, their path fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were alive and they wouldn't give up without a fight. All right, everyone, she said, her voice carrying the warmth of camaraderie. Let's get to work. You've got a planet to save, and a galaxy to annoy, Grayson added, earning a round of laughter. As they sailed through the dark, Anka felt the weight of their shared struggle, their shared hope, and found it was enough. The universe was vast, and its challenges many, but they were human. They were stubborn, irreverent, and clever. And come hell or high water, they'd find a way to survive. Next stop, diplomacy, Boris muttered, a grin tugging at his lips. Let's see if we can talk a planet out of self-destruction. Piece of cake, Anka replied, though her smile was weary. And as they journeyed through the void, Anka felt the pull of destiny, the promise of a future yet unwritten. They'd face down the chaos of a sentient planet and live to tell the tale. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to keep the stars from going cold. Let's see what other nightmares the galaxy's got in store for us, she murmured, her voice a whisper of defiance. The ship sailed on, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. They'd given a planet a timeout, brokered a fragile ceasefire, and bought themselves a little more time. But the universe had a nasty habit of not letting victories last. Here's to not dying today, Grayson quipped, raising an imaginary glass. To not dying, the crew echoed, laughter mingling with the hum of the ship. And for a moment, Anka let herself believe in the impossible, the improbable, and found it was enough to keep going. As the stars stretched before them, infinite and unknowable, they pressed on, a small crew of humans defying the odds, defying fate, and daring to hope for a better tomorrow. The ship hummed through the abyss, a tiny, stubborn tick on the universe's backside, refusing to be scraped off. Anka sat in her chair, fingers tapping out a rhythm on the armrest, a habit she'd picked up to keep from throttling her crew, or herself. It was a toss-up some days. "All right, team," Anka said, her tone a mix of weary and rebellious. "We've managed to prevent the intergalactic pissing contest from turning into an all-out war. Pat yourselves on the back, but don't dislocate your shoulders. We've still got work to do." Grayson, who'd perfected the art of lounging like he was auditioning for a role as Space Bum number 3, stretched in his seat. "I was getting tired of all that pew-pew anyway. Diplomacy's the real game. You know, where everyone's lying through their teeth and hoping no one notices." Boris, from his eternal perch by the console, grunted, "Yeah, because nothing says trust like a temporary alliance with a species that looks like they've just crawled out of a horror holo flick." Anka smirked, watching the stars blur past. "Hey, everyone needs friends, even the Zeekel. We're just the unfortunate souls stuck playing interstellar matchmaker." Amelia, who'd spent the past hour poring over data streams like they were the latest trashy romance novel, looked up. "Well, maybe not friends. Acquaintances who tolerate each other's presence without resorting to murder-suicide seems more accurate." "Details," Anka replied, waving a hand dismissively. "At least we're not dead and the universe isn't unraveling, today, anyway." Speaking of not dead, Grayson piped up, a mischievous glint in his eye. "What's our plan for when the Zeekel get tired of playing nice?" Anka sighed, leaning back. "Play it by ear, make up some inspirational garbage, or run like hell. Whichever feels less like tempting fate." "Solid plan," Boris snorted. "Almost as solid as this ship's hull after our last little escapade." Their laughter was an anchor amidst the chaos. It was a comforting sound, one that reminded them they were still alive, still human, and still capable of laughing in the face of death. "Well, for now, let's focus on our next move," Anka said, shaking off the thought. "Bifurca's still got its issues. We've given them a breather, but they'll need more than a timeout if they're going to make this ceasefire stick." Amelia nodded, scribbling notes that looked disturbingly like alien hieroglyphics. "We're essentially babysitting a planet with enough destructive potential to take out half the sector. And both halves of Bifurca think they're the star of their own little tragedy. Sounds like my last family reunion," Grayson muttered. "Except with less screaming and more passive-aggressive side-eye." Speaking of family, Anka added, "Let's make sure our new in-laws, the Zeekel, don't decide the best way to continue this alliance is by blasting us into a fine mist. Anyone got ideas on how to keep them entertained? Poker night with plasma rifles as stakes," Boris suggested, half-joking. "Everyone loves high stakes," Anka chuckled, shaking her head. "I'll pencil that in as a last resort." As they continued their journey, Anka couldn't help but reflect on the impact their mission had had. They'd been sent to Bifurca to stop a planet-wide tantrum from turning into a universal catastrophe. They'd averted war, but at what cost? The universe was still a powder keg, and they were just one of the many sparks that could set it off. "Look," Anka said, turning serious for a rare moment, "we're not just trying to save a planet. We're trying to prove that humans can be more than just scrappy survivors." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Is this the part where you give us a motivational speech about hope and unity?" "Maybe," Anka admitted, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Or maybe I'm just trying to keep us from going insane out here." Whichever comes first, the crew shared a glance, a silent understanding that they were in this together, come hell or high water. They might not have all the answers, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. "So," Captain Grayson quipped, "when do we deliver our TED talk on how to survive existential dread and alien diplomacy?" Anka laughed, a sound that echoed through the bridge. "First, we survive the week. Then we figure out how to charge admission." The ship continued its trek through the stars, its crew a motley band of misfits with more courage than sense. They were defying odds, facing down nightmares, and discovering that humanity's role in the galaxy was far more complicated and hopeful than any of them had imagined. As they sailed on, Anka felt a strange sense of peace. They were drifting through a universe that was vast, unpredictable, and often downright terrifying. But they were alive and they had each other. In the end, that was all they really needed. "All right, crew," Anka said, breaking the comfortable silence, "let's keep our heads down, our spirits up, and see if we can keep the universe from eating itself." Their laughter filled the bridge once more, a comforting balm against the endless night. "Here's to not dying today," Grayson joked, raising another imaginary toast. "To not dying," the crew echoed, their voices a mixture of sarcasm and genuine hope. And as the ship sailed on, its crew defying the odds with every breath, Anka found herself believing in a future where humans, Zeekel, and even sentient planets could find a way to coexist. A future where they could keep laughing, keep fighting, and keep rising above the chaos. Let's see what other nightmares the galaxy's got in store for us, she murmured, her voice a whisper of defiance, determination, and perhaps just a hint of hope. They journeyed on, a testament to human ingenuity, stubbornness, and the irrepressible urge to survive. They'd faced down the chaos of a sentient planet, brokered a fragile ceasefire, and bought themselves a little more time in a universe that seemed hell-bent on tearing itself apart. Grayson leaned back, hands behind his head, and sighed contentedly. You know, I think we might actually pull this off. Just don't jinx it, Boris grumbled, tapping away at his console. Last thing we need is the universe hearing you and deciding to show us who's boss. Relax, Amelia said, not looking up from her screen. We've got time, and for once it feels like it might be on our side. Anka watched her crew, feeling an unexpected surge of gratitude. They were battered, weary, and a little worse for wear, but damn it, they were her family. A dysfunctional, sarcastic, often infuriating family, but hers all the same. All right, let's get back to work, she said, her voice filled with warmth and resolve. We've got a planet to save, a ceasefire to uphold, and an entire galaxy to annoy. The ship sailed through the void, leaving behind the chaos of Bifurca and sailing headlong into a future filled with uncertainty and potential. Anka knew they were far from safe, but for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to keep the stars from going cold. Here's to not dying, Grayson quipped, a grin on his face. To not dying, the crew answered, laughter mingling with the hum of the engines. And as they ventured into the unknown, Anka felt the pull of destiny, the promise of a future yet unwritten. Together, they'd face whatever the universe threw at them, head held high and middle finger raised.